From one Zach to another. Zach Blackerby of Locked On Auburn was here. Zach Seyko, Locked On Penn State. He's here now. What is the biggest question for Penn State going into this year? Why don't we start right there, Zach? What is the biggest question? What's the number one thing you look at and go, I don't know how this is going to play out, but it's going to impact Penn State's season?
I mean, Penn State certainly has a couple big questions. From my point of view, it's how close are you to actually breaking through, right? Can you win the Big Ten Conference? Can you even get into the conference championship? Are you in the same class as Oregon and Ohio State? Or are you in that class of, well, you're still 10-2, even though I think 10-2 can get you a lot of things. That's not your traditional 10-2 anymore, Spencer, for Penn State football. But the idea is that you need to get to the college football playoff. If you don't, that's terrible. That's awful. And if you get there, you need to win at the very minimum in the first round. Yes, you want them to win as much as they can, but I think the Penn State fan base would be satisfied with a college football playoff entry. You host a game at Beaver Stadium in the dead of winter, and you win that game. And then after that, it's like, okay, yes, winning's nice, but we've kind of reached some progress. Can they actually have progress where I think the team's actually really good, despite some other people might say like, well, they're probably going to take a step backwards. And no, they have all of their foundational players now becoming rising juniors. Drew Aller, Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen, Abdul Carter, list goes on and on. And this is a veteran-laden team. I like Penn State's chances, even though their schedule is tougher. It's a tough schedule.
It is not the easiest of Big Ten schedules. They have three of the newcomers from the Pac-12. Oregon is not among them, so that's the team you'd probably want to play the least because they should be the best of the four new arrivals, but playing all three, at the very least, there's going to be some newness, some unfamiliarity involved there. But I want to go to the roster for just a moment. Is there a position group that you have a major question about? You know, is the number one aspect of this roster you're questioning, is it Drew Aller taking a step forward? Is it the offensive line? Is it the secondary? Where are you looking?
It's the offensive line for sure, because I think they did a lot in the transfer portal to help out the secondary. Linebacker group might fall in that category, but you have Kobe King, you have Dom DeLuca, you have Tony Rojas. All those guys should be better this season. But offensive line, you're losing three former NFL draft picks. So Olu Fashanu, Hunter Nourzad, Kanan Wallace, all move on from an offensive line that was pretty average at best from a season ago. So you have three NFL draft picks. One of them was just a fringe top 10 pick in Olu Fashanu to the Jets. So now what does that mean? I look across the line of scrimmage and I don't see anybody to that caliber. I don't see any future NFL draft picks at this point in time. Could people play their way into an NFL draft selection? Absolutely. But when you have to replace 60% of that was NFL caliber, and I currently don't see talent that at this point in time is draftable. Could they make an NFL roster and be signed to a training camp? Absolutely. But as far as a bona fide selection, day 1, 2, or 3, I just don't see it right now. So the offensive line definitely has some question marks around it.
I want to go to this schedule because we mentioned it is not the easiest. And the four biggest games that will, in all likelihood, define Penn State's season, they've got three of them on the road. Week 1 at West Virginia, and then a 3-game stretch where they go at USC, at Wisconsin, and host Ohio State. They can win any of those 4 football games. I think they're far and away the toughest games on the schedule. You know, they host Washington, but at home, Washington's in a rebuild year. I don't think that the Huskies will be too much of a problem there for the Nittany Lions. But then you think about, well, could they trip up, at Purdue or at Minnesota? Maybe, but probably not. I think the floor on this Penn State team is still going to be high enough to avoid those sorts of stumbles.
Sure.
But those 4 games, West Virginia, at USC, at Wisconsin, host Ohio State, boy, it feels like if you go 2-2 in that stretch, you're doing well. If you're 3-1, you're probably contending for a Big Ten championship. But do you think that going 1-3 in those games is a realistic possibility?
Absolutely, because you're going to Southern California for the first time in the regular season of the James Franklin era. So Joe Paterno teams had done that before, but now conference realignment, going on the road to SoCal in the middle of the season, and then you get a bye week coming back from that. Okay, but then you got to go back on the road to Camp Randall and an improved Wisconsin team. Oh, yeah, and then you host probably the number one team in the country, the Ohio State Buckeyes, a week later. And
I
then
might have Georgia as the number one team in the country.
I think Ohio State's my pick right now. I get Georgia, but probably in the case of the rankings. But all right, let's say this: definitely a top 3 team in
Yes.
Ohio State.
Yeah, no, they're not outside anybody's top 3. I don't think that is even arguable.
So Ohio State's going to be a top 3 team, which is the game for Penn State, like it is every year. That still is the season-defining game, even though there are ones that can trip you up. You can afford to lose to 2 of them. That's fair. But if you lose to 3, then you're just leaving it up to the committee. If you're 9-3, you are leaving it up to the committee to decide whether you belong in the top 12 or not. And hopefully you end up losing. If that's the case, you end up losing to the better 3 teams and not tripping up against somebody that you shouldn't. I think Wisconsin's definitely a possibility, especially behind USC like that. I think the trip to SoCal in the middle of the season is just going to be different for this group because they're used to going to the Rose Bowl, or used to at least that long trip when they have a month of preparation and not when you play an opponent the week before. So that's why I think USC is the likely of the losses. There's familiarity with Wisconsin, and I think Penn State's defense will just be able to outmatch what Wisconsin has on offense at this given time on paper. Right now, a lot of that can change. So Ohio State and USC are my 2 picks for losses there. So 10-2 get you in the college football playoff.
I think it probably does. Interestingly enough, before they travel to USC and start that gauntlet of a 3-game stretch, they host UCLA. So back-to-back weeks where Penn State is playing a school from Los Angeles. In the regular season, everything is fine. It's the meme of the dog or whatever, and everything's on fire around him. This is fine. This is fine. Everything is fine. Which of those games outside of Ohio State do you think is most important, Zach, for Penn State to win? At Wisconsin, at USC, or week 1 at West Virginia?
I think it's week 1 at West Virginia because
I agree.
that really changes the framing if they were to. So I'm confident in my pick that Penn State wins that game. I just think they match up well with West Virginia, and I've had to go on a tour now to defend my thoughts about that in the given matchup. But if you were to happen to lose that game, you almost can't afford another loss at that point up until you get to Ohio State. So if that's going to be your other mulligan, I would just rather save that additional mulligan for the middle of the season, and definitely not the end of the season, because again, I feel like there's recency bias with these committees. If West Virginia is able to pull off that upset, Penn State really is going to have to reconsider things, because then an 8-4 and a 9-3 season just become a little more likely. And then Penn State's trying to play catch up, whereas the cards won't exactly be in their favor when it comes to the recognition by the College Football Playoff Committee.
Zach Seyko, locked on Nittany Lions of the Penn State variety, of course. Not that there's another one, but you can never be too specific. Zach, appreciate the time as always, my man.
Thanks for having me on the show, Spencer. Appreciate it.
Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.